We begin today the Gemara at the bottom of Daf Lamed Tes Amud Beis, the last line. This whole sugya here speaks about freeing an Evet Kanani and various different halachas that applies to this. How you free, when he's free, and so on. Amar Rav Zera, Amar Rav Chanina, Amar Rav Ashi, Amar Rebbe. Now these names are very unique because you have here Rav Ashi saying something in the name of Rebbe. Rebbe, of course, was a Tana. And Rav Ashi is usually Rav Ashi that put together the Gemara, and he was the latest of the Amoraim. So some say this Rav Ashi is not the usual Rav Ashi; it's a different Rav Ashi. Okay, so what did he say? Evet shenosa as bas chayrin, an Evet Kanani. So he's only allowed to marry a shivcha Kananis, and he went and married a bas chayrin, meaning he married a yid b'fnei rabbi, and this chasana, this marriage takes place in front of his master that owned him till this point. He's considered to be free. Why? So Rashi explains, because there's a chazak here. If not for the fact that the master freed him, the master would not allow his Eved to go and get married in front of him without saying a word. So it must be that he was freed already from before. On the top of Daf Men. You got it? Daf Men. So Rabbi Yechanan said to the one that said this halacha here, whoever it was, whether he said it to Rab Zayda or someone else, Kol kach yesh biyotcha. You have such a big chiddush of Rebbe in your hands, but va'nishayna. However, I learn in a brayse that says different than the chiddush of Rebbe. What does the brayse say? Hakaysev shtar eres l'shivchasei. A master writes a shtar kedushin that he, the master himself, is getting married to his maidservant. Rav Meir says that, yep, the marriage will take effect. Now, as a master, he's a yid, he's not allowed to marry his shivcha kananis. So basically, the way the Gemara understands right now what this means is, the fact that he's writing Eshta Edis and he's marrying a shivcha kananis, he must have freed her before. So we know that she's free already. That's basically like what Rebbe said before. But Chachamim say, no, the fact that the master is doing this is no proof that he freed her in advance. And the fact that he's giving her now this stark kedushin is meaningless. So she's not mukadeshes. So the question of the Gemara is, why would Rebbe not agree to the opinion of Chachamim, which is the majority? And why is he going with the opinion of Rab Meir? So the Gemara answers that we have to explain what Rebbe said differently than we thought. It says the Gemara Keda'omer Rabbe Barav Shila. What Rebbe says here is similar to what Rabbi Barav Shila said, and that's coming soon, later in the Gemara here, what Rabbi Barav Shila said. What did he say? So the Gemara later brings a similar thing, what happens if an Evet Kanani, which is not obligated in putting on tefillin, but he did put on tefillin in front of his master. So the Gemara later says, well, that's a proof that his master must have freed him. The master is not saying anything. So Rabbi Barav Shila explained that that's only if the master himself is putting him on the tefillin. Then it's a proof that he actually freed him. So Hachanami, over here, what did Rebbe mean when Rebbe said that this slave got married to a yid in front of the master? It's the master himself that is marrying off his slave to a wife. In other words, if this slave would just be getting married in front of the master to a Yiddish wife, that's not enough of a proof that the master must have freed him from before. But if it's the master himself marrying him off, that's enough of a proof. So at this point, what the Gemara is thinking is that in the case of the Braisa, where the master himself is marrying his own Shivcha Kananis, that's not a proof. Why? Because he's doing it for his own Hana. He wants to marry his Shivcha Kananis. But it doesn't prove that he must have freed her from before. But if the master is marrying off his slave to a Yid, that does prove that the master must have freed him before. But the Gemara doesn't accept this pshat. Frek the Gemara, is there ever a case where you could say that for his slave the master would not do something for him which is asa? The master would not marry him off to a yid if he's still a slave. But and the master himself would marry a shivcha kananis if he did not free her yet. Why would we suspect that the master himself is doing a isser? The fact that the master is marrying a shivcha kananis, isn't that a proof that he must have freed her? And the Mefarshim add to this, it's so easy for the master to marry his shivcha kananis beheter by just freeing the shivcha kananis. So why would he marry her be'isser? So the fact that he's marrying her should be strong enough of a proof that he must have freed her from before. Oh, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So therefore, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak explains that we misunderstood the pshat on this whole brayse here. This brayse has nothing to do with what Rebbe said. The case of this brayse is the Amma law. He told her, and that is in the star here that he writes to her. He writes to her, that you'll be free and be married to me with this star that I'm giving you. So he's trying to free her right now. Rebbe was talking about a situation where we have to think of, should we assume that he already freed her from before? What are we talking about over here? The star itself. He wrote inside the star itself that now you should be free and I'm going to marry you. The question is this a language of a star that could free a Evet? Rav Meir says, Yesh b'loshen hazeh loshen shichrut. This language is adequate enough. It actually frees the slave right now, or frees this maidservant right now, so he could marry her. But Rabbanan say, Ein b'loshen hazeh loshen shichrut. You have to write a proper loshen that you're freeing her. Writing in a star to a shivcha kananis that now you're going to leave and marry me, but you didn't properly free her, so therefore she won't be free. So it's a completely different machlekes, whether this language here is freeing her or not. Now the Gemara brings back that what was mentioned before regarding a slave that put on tefillin in front of his master. A slave, he puts on tefillin in front of his master. So this itself is proof that his master must have freed him before. So Rashi says that it's not the derech of an evet to put on tefillin. An evet is potet to put on tefillin because he's only chayiv in a mitzvah like a isha. So it seems from Rashi that he's allowed to put on tefillin, just like a isha that's allowed to fulfill any mitzvah that she's potet in, all the mitzvahs seishas mangroma. But nevertheless, it's not the derech for an evet to put on tefillin. So if he's putting on tefillin and his master is not saying anything, it's proof that he's free. So yatzel l'chayris. So the Gemara asks on this, Meisvei, the Braisa says, Lovai menu rabbi, if a master borrows money from a slave. What does that mean? This is whatever money the slave owns belongs to the master. So he's borrowing money from him, that proves that he's already free. Or his master appointed the slave to be a caretaker of all of his properties. That's not something that you usually do for an eved. That's also a proof that he's free. Or the slave put on tefillin in front of his master. Or he got an aliyah and he read 3 psukim from the Torah in the Beis HaKnesses in front of his master. Nevertheless, all of this is still not enough of a proof that his master must have freed him before. So how does Rabbi Shua ben Levi say that if he puts on tefillin in front of his master, it is a proof? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shua ben Levi was speaking about when the master himself put him on the tefillin. That's a proof that he's free. But if the slave himself put on the tefillin in front of his master, then it's not a proof. Okay, now the Gemara comes back to a different halacha regarding freeing a slave. Ki asar Avdimi, when Avdimi came from Eretz Yisrael. So he said, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, he said a halacha that he learned from Rabbi Yechanan in Eretz Yisrael. Mi shama b'shas misasai, a person that said right before he passed away, Ploinis shevchasi, this maidservant that I own, al yishtabdu ba la'acha moisi. Do not have her work for you like a maidservant after I pass away. So what happens now? We force the inheritors to write for this maidservant a get shichrur, and like this she'll be free. So what's the pshat in this halacha that he brought in the name of Rabbi Yechanan? So there's really 2 chidushim here. Chidush number 1 is this language that the master says before he passes away is enough of a language to be meshachrer. Even though he didn't clearly say that he's meshachrer the eved, he didn't say a lashon of hefke either. He just said, Al yishtab de balacha maisi. Don't work with her after I pass away. That's enough that now the monetary ownership of this slave is already given up. The master already gave that up. Now, as we learned before many times in the Gemara, the last few blot, there's 2 aspects of ownership in the Evet Kanani. There's the monetary ownership, the mominus, and then there's the Isser status, the status of this Evet Kanani that's a half yid sort of. He's chayiv in some mitzvahs, but he only becomes a full yid when he's free. So what Rabbi Yechanan is saying here is another chiddush. Even though the monetary ownership was given up already by the master, but nevertheless the children still will inherit the slave as far as the aspect of the Isser ownership is concerned. They do inherit the slave, and the children have to give a get shichror to free the Isser status of this eved, that she should become completely mutter to marry into Klal Yisrael. Okay, that's what Rav Dimi brought in the name of Rav Yechanan. So now, Rav Dimi further said, Omru lufan of Rabami v'Ravasi, when Rav Yechanan said this halacha, Rabbi and Avasi argued with him, and they said, Rebbe, our Rebbe, don't you agree that her children will be slaves? So Rashi explains what they were really arguing with Rabbi Yechanan is, you don't have a real lashon of the master freeing the Shifcha Kananis. What did he say? He said, Al Yishtabduba. What does Rashi says? What does he mean when he said Al Yishtabduba? Don't make her work too hard. Be easy with her. Okay, so she shouldn't work too hard. But he never freed her. So if she has children, so the children will be regular avodim. They'll have to work like regular avodim. So their question was, where do you have a lashon of shichrur here that the master ever said? There's no proper lashon of shichrur. Okay, this is what Rav Dimi reported in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. But now the Gemara brings another version. Ki yasser Rav Shmuel by Yehuda. When Rav Shmuel by Yehuda came from Eretz Yisrael, so he said something else. He said, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, that what Rabbi Yechanan said was as follows. Mishama b'shas misasai. A master that says before he passes away, Ploinus shivchasai, this maidservant that I have, Kairas ruach asasali. She made me comfortable, she made me happy in my lifetime, she served me. So yasala kairas ruach. After I pass away, you should do also things that are good and comfortable for her. So what happens now? What do the children have to do? We force the children, and they must do something that is good for her, for this maidservant. And Rashi says that even includes freeing her. If she says that kairas ruach for me means that I don't want to work at all, I want to be freed, they have to free her. Says the Gemara, my time, what is this? Why? The master didn't free her yet. But mitzvah lekayim divrei emes. Nevertheless, the children have a mitzvah to fulfill what the father, the master, said to do. So therefore, we had this before in the Gemara. There's a mitzvah to fulfill a command that the mes says. Okay, so over here in this version, completely different version of what Rav Yechanan said. We don't see over here anything of the previous what Rav Dimi reported. Completely different. Okay, in connection to this, the Gemara brings a statement that Ameimer said, and this is eventually going to connect back here to what Rav Yechanan said. Now, Ameimer said, "Hamafker avdai," a person that declares his eved hefker, oisei eved ein lo takana. So now this slave is stuck. He's stuck in between, and there's nothing. We can't rectify his situation. Why not? Why is he stuck in between? My time. Gufei lo kanile. Once his master freed him, so he doesn't own his body anymore. The monetary ownership is free, so it's not his. Isura is hefker, that is, I meant to say. So it's not his anymore. But Isura hu deike gabe. But the Isser status, which means the fact that he's not yet a full Yid, he didn't get a proper get shichrur, so he's not yet a full Yid. But the master himself cannot give him a get shichrur anymore because he's not his to give him the get shichrur. So who's going to give him a get shichrur to totally free him to be able to marry a bas chayrin? So he's going to be stuck. That's what Ameimer said. So on this, Ravashi asked Ameimer, what do you mean? We learned already before that all the Amirayim said differently. Ula said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. And also Rav Chia bar Alvin, Amar Rav. And Rav Chia bar Alvin said in the name of Rav. Echad zeh ve'echad zeh yatsa l'cheiros v'tzarech get shichro. That in both cases, the Gemara before said in different cases, when a master frees his slave by hefker, whether he was makdishim or hefker, in either way, once you declare him hefker, he becomes hefker, but v'tzarech get shichror, and the master could give the slave a get shichror. So how could Ameimer say that he's stuck and the master can't give him? So Amalei, but Ameimer still argued and said, no, I'm still right, because tzarech vein le takana. Yeah, true, Rabbi Yechanan and Rav said that he's going to need a get shichror, but nevertheless he's still stuck, because who's going to give him the get shichror? The master doesn't own him anymore, he declared him hefker. Okay, but now, Ikedomi, there's another version to this, and this connects back to what was brought before in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. So Ikedomi, another version is Oma Ameimer. What Ameimer said is, Hamafker Avdai, a person declared his Eved Hefker, Umeis, and now the master passed away. So Oisai HaEved Ein Lo Takana. This is the case where Ameimer said that this Eved is stuck and there's nothing we can do for him. My timer, so what's the reason? Gufei Lo Kanile. The body of the slave himself, the monetary ownership of his body, is not acquired anymore by anybody because the father, before he passed away, declared him hefker. But Isura hu de'ikar gabe, the problem is the status of Isra, that he's not yet a full Yid, that was still held up by the father, the master. But the problem is, the father, the master, passed away. V'isura lebrei loy meiris. That aspect of ownership over the Eved, which is just a kinyan for his status of whether he's a Yid or not, that's not something that the children inherit. Children will inherit a slave which is fully owned by the father. The monetary ownership goes over to the children. Not here in this case where the father already declared him hefker. It was just the isser aspect that remained that the children don't yarshin. So who's going to give him a get shichra? That's what Ameimer said. Now in this, so Rav Ashi says to Ameimer, but as we quoted before, Rav Dimi, when he came from Eretz Yisrael, so he said in the name of Rav Yechanan. So what did the Gemara quote before? That Rav Dimi said in the name of Rav Yechanan that person before he passes away, he basically says that his evet should be freed. But then what happens after that? The children we force the children to write a get shikra. So Rabbi Yechanan, according to Rav Dimi at least, clearly said that the children will yarshan an eved even after he is declared to be hefker. Because even though there's only a isser ownership here regarding this slave that's left over, but even that the children inherit and they could give a get shikra. So Ameimer responded to this, no, I disagree. The Rav Dimi to'usehi. What Rav Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan is a mistake. Now what's the mistake here? So they said to Ameimer, what was the mistake? So what was the mistake that Rav Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan? So as I pointed out before, one of the chedushim here that you have in what Rav Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan is the master never used the proper language of shichra. He never properly freed the eved, and still Rav Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan it's considered to be free. What did the master say? The master just said that al yishtab duba, don't have to work hard. So the Gemara says, so my tus, what is the mistake of Rabbi Yechanan? Rav Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, the layamra b'loshen shichra, because the way he repeated it, there wasn't the proper language of freeing the eved. But ha'amra b'loshen shichra, it sounds like though that if a proper loshen of shichra would be used, so then hachanami. Then I would say that he becomes free, and we would force the Yarshim to give a get shikhr. So it's still a question on what Ameimer said. Ameimer said that once the Eved was freed by the father, the momentous aspect was freed, then the children can't give a get shikhr anymore. They don't Yarshin the Isser aspect of this Eved. So Ameimer responded to this and said, no, that's not the only reason why I disagree to what Rav Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Amalei Ano k'Rav Shmuel by Yehuda Svirili. I agree. I hold like what Rav Shmuel by Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, not like what Rav Dimi said in Rabbi Yechanan. What Rav Dimi said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan is totally a mistake. Not only because there wasn't the proper lashon shikhr, but also this point here that the children could give a get shikhr. It's a mistake. The children don't have any inheritance, or there's no possibility for them to give a get shikhr. Okay, the Gemara brings here now a story of also again all the sugi here about freeing avodim. Hahu diskrita the avdi. There was this village of avodim. They were all avodim Canaanim that were owned by a yid. Now the yid went and sold this village that he owned of avodim Canaanim. He sold them all to a guy. Now we'll see that Rashi brings, there's a Mishnah later on Daf Mem Gimel, a yid is not allowed to sell his avodim Canaanim to a guy. Okay, we'll see later in the Mishnah there's a knas actually. The Chachamim gave a knas. If a yid sells his evet Kanani to a guy, then automatically these avodim Kananim become free. If the guy that bought these avodim Kananim gives them up or frees them, they don't have to go back to their original master. They become completely free. Okay, so that's what happened over here. This yid that owned a lot of avodim Kananim sold them all to a guy. So really, he's not supposed to do this. They should go free. Now what happened? Kalu marvese basroi. The second master, which is the guy that bought these avodim Kananim, passed away. Died, better said. Okay. But then, so Asul Kamei de Ravine, they came to Ravine to ask Ravine, so what do we do now? Right? So, like I said, they really should become completely free, because the first master that sold them to the guy was not allowed, and there's a knas that they become free. So Amalu, Ravine says, but there's still a problem. You never got a proper get shikhr. There is a knas midrabanan that they go free, but they still need a get shikhr. So they said, Zilu ahadra abnei marvasa. So Ravina says, go to the children of the first master that owned you and sold you. And so that original master apparently wasn't alive anymore. So go to the children of that first master, marvasa kamoy, that is the first master, and and they should write for you a get shikhr to free you. So here again we see not like a Meimer. A Meimer said children don't have the power to write a get shikhr. But here Ravin is saying, no, go back to the children of the first master and he's going to write a get shikhr. But Rabbanan argued with Ravina. They said, but Amema said in such a case, the children can't do anything. Hamaf gavdai. Once the master already gave up the ownership of this slave, now Mason, then he passes away. So Isaiah Eved, now this slave, ain't like takana. No one can rectify a situation. The children cannot give a get shechra. Amaluhu. So Ravina said, you're asking me from Ameimar? I'm not Rav Dimi svirili. I hold like Rav Dimi that brought in the name of Rav Yechanan that the children could give a get shechra. Amrelei, so the Rabbanan argued with Ravina. They said, but Rav Dimi tosahi. Didn't we say before that what Rav Dimi said was a mistake? So Amaluhu, so Ravina said, no, Rav Dimi, maybe there's a certain detail that he said that was a mistake, but not this halacha about the children giving a get shechra. So what was the mistake of what Rav Dimi said? Because in the way he brought the halacha of Rabbi Yechanan, the master never clearly said that he wants to free his maidservant. But ha'amra b'lashon shechra, if the master would completely free the maidservant, so then hachanami, so then the halacha would be correct that now the children could give a get shechra. So he basically, Ravina argued on Ameimer, and the Gemara concludes, V'hilchase Ravina. The halacha is like Ravina, that children could give a get shechur even after their father freed the Eved already. The Gemara brings down another story, Ahu Avda de Beitrei. There was this Eved Kanani that was owned by partners. Kam Chad Minai V'Shachrei Lepalgi. So one Eved got up and freed his part, his half of the ownership of this Eved. So now this Eved is in a situation where he's half Eved and half free. So the halach is, as we'll see later in the Mishnah, we force the second master to free the Eved completely. So he shouldn't be stuck in between, he can't marry anyone, and so on. So Amayidach, the other owner, the other master of this slave says, Hashtashmi bi Rabbanan, the Rabbanan are going to hear what happened here, and they're going to force me to lose my rights, and they're going to force me to free him. So he wanted to prevent Chachamim from forcing him to do this. So what did he do? Azal akne lebnoi cotton. He went and he gave the half that he owned as a gift to his child, which is a cotton. So now this slave is not owned by the father anymore, he's owned by the child, which is a cotton. Okay, now the problem is, Bezdin does not force a cotton to free a slave. So Bezdin can force an adult to do something, but to force a cotton to do something, that Bezdin won't force. So that's basically, so now, the Bezdin will not force him to free him. So now, so he sent to Rav Papa to ask him, look what this guy did. He's preventing us of doing what we're supposed to have him free. So what should we do? Shalach le, Rav Papa answered him, don't worry, we can outsmart him. Kasha asa, kenya asa loy, gemulu yoshev loy. This is from a pasuk, which is basically saying, like he did, we'll do back to him, we'll outsmart. He tried to outsmart us, we're going to outsmart him. How's that? Anan kimlon biyinuke de mekave daite legabi zuzi. We know children that they see money, they get excited about money. So therefore, we're not going to have to force this child to free the slave. That we can't do. But let's bring money to the child, and then the child himself will be ready to free the Eved. So mekminin le'apetrupis, we give a caretaker here for this child that will make sure that whatever money will be promised to this child to free this Eved will be given, the child will get this money. And then, Makarkishle Zuzi, and we come and bring money. Karkishle means like you sort of shake money or bring money in front of the child that, look, we're offering you money for the slave. And the cost of Gittin the Cherus al Shmei. And then the child will write a get and he'll free the Eved without us even having to force him. And so therefore we could get the child to force him. It's not so difficult. Okay, Rashi points out a few interesting things. First of all, Rashi points out the apotropos himself that the Gemara talks about over here is not being appointed for the purpose to free the slave, because an apotropos cannot free a slave. Doesn't have the power to do such a kind of thing, because he can't do anything which may bring a loss to an Eved. That's number one. Another point Rashi points out is that we're having here a child write a shtar to free a slave. How does a child have a koyach to write a shtar? There's no mekach or memkar. A child does not have the das of sale to sell to free this Eved. So Rashi says that it must be that we're talking about a child that's already at a certain age, like 6, 7 years old. There's a takonim d'Rabbanan that a child could do things that are in transactions and he could free the Eved. And that's what the Gemara means here. That's why this child could free this Eved. Taisus has a completely different pshat in the Gemara. Taisus has a problem with Rashi. We're talking about freeing an Eved, that this Eved should be able to get married into Klal Yisrael. If the child freeing the Eved could only do so with the Rabbanon, but Minat Torah, the child has no power to free this Eved, how is this freedom of the Eved in effect Minat Torah that he can marry into Klal Yisrael? So Taisus brings from Rabbeinu Tam a completely different shot in this Gemara. Okay, but that's you got to look into Taisus for that. Okay, let's continue the Braisa Mem Amud Beis on the top. So the Gemara continues, Tana Rabbanon, Ha'omer asisi ploini avdi ben chayrin. Person says that I made my eved a ben chayrin. Asi ben chayrin, or he uses the expression Asi ben chayrin. He is a ben chayrin. So harei ben chayrin. These are languages that mean that he's actually free. It's good l'shainis to free him. But if he's harei ben chayrin, so then he's going to be free. Second, all these l'shainis. Or if he said harei ben chayrin, this is one of the l'shainis. So then also harei ben chayrin, he'll be free. But if the lashon that he said was senu ben chayrin, I will make him free. I will free him. He's sort of saying future tense. So then the question is, does that mean that he actually freed him or not? It's the lashon asid. So Rabbi says, yeah, what he's saying is, I'm going to free him. And right now, that's how he's freeing him. By giving him a star that this is written in, that I'm going to free him. So yeah, he's free. Chachamim says that he will not be kainet. This is a future tense, but he has to actually write another star where he's actually properly freeing him. Rabbi Yochanan said about this brayse, even though the brayse said ha'omer, which means that he's saying this, but really it means that he's writing this. V'kulon b'shtar. This is all if he writes this in a star. So yeah, there's a long Rashi about this because we had before in Gemara that many times that a master could free his eved by declaring him hefker b'dibur. So why is all of a sudden Rabbi Yochanan saying that this has to be tafke in a star? So Rashi says declaring him hefker is one thing. That could be done b'dibur. But if you're not declaring him hefker, you're writing that you're freeing him, that has to be in writing. That can't be b'dibur. That's the first main pshat that Rashi says over here in the Gemara. There is another pshat that Rashi says that v'kulam b'shtar means that he will be free, but that's only the monetary ownership. But the kinyan of the Isra, the status that he should be able to marry into Klal Yisrael, you're going to additionally need a shtar shichrur. But Rashi refutes that pshat, but so Rashi remains with the first pshat I said. Similar halacha, Tanur Rabbana, we learned in the Brayso, Ayman asati sada ploinis leploni. A person says or writes that I gave this field to this individual. Or he writes Nusuna leploni, it's given to this individual. Harehi shaloi. Or he writes this field now belongs to this person. These are all good languages that means that he actually gave it to him. Harehi shaloi, so it belongs to this person. But if he writes etneno leploni, which means future, I will give it to this person. Rab Meir says it's still a good lashon that yes, he will be kainit. Chachamim say it's a lashon of future tense, but he has to actually do that. He has to make another star to write that he's actually giving it to him. Rabbi Yochanan said, "V'kulon b'shtar." All of this is all not talking only about something that a person said, but he wrote this into a star. Tanur Rabbanan and a brayso we learned. Ha'omer asisi ploini avdi ben chayrin. A master comes and says, "I freed my slave." But what happened is, v'hu omer, the slave himself comes and says, "Lo yasani," never happened. I don't remember. He never freed me. So who do we believe, the master or the slave? Chayshinon, what we're concerned about is Shema zikaloi al yidei acher. It's possible that the master freed him, but he didn't free the eved directly. Maybe he freed him by someone else accepting a shtar shichror on his behalf. What's the halacha regarding freeing a eved? It's a schus for the eved to be free. Zachal adam shalei b'fanav. Someone else could receive a shtar shichror on his behalf. So therefore, we believe the master that he freed him, even if the eved doesn't know about it. Could be he did it without the eved knowing. But what if the master said, "Kasafti v'nasati loy"? I wrote and gave you a shtar shichror into your hands. And the slave argues and says, "No, you never wrote me, you never gave me. It's not true." So now you have an argument between them. What happened over here? Says the Gemara, we believe the slave. The slave is admitting that he never got freed. He's maided, that he's still owned by his master. So we believe the slave more than the master. Why do we believe the slave more than the master? So Yishayim say various pshatim. The Rashba says because the master could forget what happened here. The master had it in mind and he had his machshava to free his slave, but from the machshava to action, he may have forgotten that he didn't take action. The slave, though, had no machshava about this in advance. So if he's saying, I never got it from my master, it's probably true that he never got it. Or the Rosh over here says that it's possible that the master wrote a shtar and sent a shliach to deliver it to the eved, and the master is under the impression that it was delivered, but not the slave is saying, no, I never got it. So we believe the eved more than the master. Similar, a person says, I gave this field to this individual as a gift, and the recipient says, no, he never gave it to me. So he's made it, it's not mine. Chayshinon, what we're concerned of here is, Shema Zikla De'acher. Again, maybe he did give it to him as a gift, but not directly, through someone else. But if he says, If this person says kasafti v'nasati loy, I gave it to him directly, and the person says no, he never gave it to me directly. So again we say dos baldin kemei edim domi, that the recipient, he's agreeing that he never got it. So he's made it, so it's not his at all. But the Gemara asks, mi oichel peiris. So in this case, so even though we just said that we believe the recipient that it's not his, but the master, not the master, the first owner of the field is claiming and saying, no, I did give it to you. So mi oichel peiris. Who's the one that eats the peiris that grow on this property? Rav Chisda said, Naisen oichel peiris. The one that the giver, the first owner, he continues eating the peiris because, like we just said, we trust the recipient that says that I never got it at all. But Rabbi says, no, we're not so clear about this. It's still not so sure. Mishalshin is a peiris. We have to give the peiris to grow on this property to a third individual to hold on to it until Eliyahu and Navi comes, because we don't really know who's the owner of this property. So the Gemara explains, V'loi pligi. It's not an argument here, because we already said before that we don't believe the recipient. Again, that we don't believe the giver. We do believe the recipient that he never got it. And therefore, ha ba'aba. If the father himself, that is the recipient, is here, and he's saying, I never got it, then we believe him. So the Naisen could eat the fruits. Ha bebra. But if the recipient himself is not here, but it's just a son of his, and the son is saying, oh, I heard from my father that he never got it. But then we can't be so sure. Then the son may have misunderstood his father, so over here it's going to be a suffix, and in such a case, the fruits cannot be eaten not by the recipient and not by the giver, but you have to give it to a third individual.